Yeah, it's Edward from San Diego, California.
Hey, what's up, Edward? Good to hear from you again.
How
I
you
appreciate
doing?
you calling in.
Yeah, I want to bring up a few points. Yeah, I noticed that Patrick Surtain yesterday was playing like 7 yards off the receiver, and it seemed I don't understand why he was doing that. Did you notice that?
Yeah, I think, in a situation like this, I mean, LSU, as we talked about, has very dangerous
Hmm.
wide receivers that were going to create challenges for Alabama's corners. And I think when we look at that
Hmm.
matchup today, you see that
Hmm.
LSU's wide receivers won those matchups. I mean, these are future NFL
Correct.
guys. I'm not sure what exactly if they didn't want to press those guys or if they didn't feel confident pressing those guys, but they certainly paid for it. I mean, Joe Burrow looked incredible. He looked like the best quarterback in all of college football, like we've been talking about going into this game, and he certainly shined on a big time stage.
Yeah, yeah, he did. A couple other things. I noticed, and I was listening to you a little bit ago, but I noticed it seemed like, especially like on the first 2 or 3 drives, that our Alabama, the offensive play calling was very conservative.
Yeah.
And once we opened up in the second half with the play calling, I noticed it picked up. I was just wondering, do you have any idea why you think they were conservative? Was it to protect Tua, or was it, or what do you think your reasoning was on that?
I don't know. I mean, that's kind of something that I'm trying to still figure out because I didn't
Correct.
it didn't seem like they had any rhythm besides that
Correct.
first series, right? That first series
Correct.
was magical. They came out,
Correct.
they moved right down the field, got into the red zone within 2 or 3 plays, and then the fumble happened. And then after that, it just seems like they didn't have any sort of rhythm, and the momentum got on them. And I'm proud about this team because they didn't. They hadn't. This is a team that hasn't faced adversity all season long. Yeah,
Sure.
they've dealt with injuries, but in terms of being down, I was curious to see what would happen when they came out at halftime. I personally didn't think that they would come back, even with the talent that they do have. But the play calling in the first half, I didn't like it. I didn't like the script when they came out and they were trailing 10-0. I didn't like the call with Slade Bolden, as I mentioned earlier in the show. I'm not sure, what Sarkisian had drawn up that first half where they were trying to take the mismatches from LSU, but the second half when they really just let it go and they started to play their game, I thought it was great. Another thing, as I mentioned earlier, so many drops by these wide receivers, and I think the last time we saw these receivers drop passes like that was against Clemson, right?
Yeah, correct. Judy had like 2 or 3 big drops yesterday. I noticed that.
Yeah, he had that touchdown drop. I mean, it was right in his hands. I mean, these guys are some of the best in the business, and when we were looking at Pro Football Focus, I know people don't like to compare those Pro Football Focus grades, but the LSU wide receivers are graded higher than Alabama's 3 wide receivers head to head. And I think last night they showed you why. I mean, those guys came out and they did a great job, very tough to deal with, big wide receivers. They didn't drop the football. LSU didn't drop the football. And there was I mean, Tua's numbers are still impressive, though. 418 yards, 4 touchdowns. Devontae Smith, 200 yards. How about Devontae Smith? He's gone after this season, right? I mean, he's an NFL first-round draft pick. I mean, 213 yards on last night, 2 touchdowns. So a lot to wrap your head around. Edward, I want to ask you, when we look at the top teams in college football, is this one of the top 4 teams in college football despite the defensive vulnerabilities that they've had?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that. Yeah, I really feel that they are, because here's the way that I look at it. Okay, for example, if we win the next 3 games, which I'm pretty sure we will, and we beat Auburn bad, which I think we will, and let's say it comes down between us and Oregon for that final 4th spot, Oregon got beat by Auburn.
Yep.
And I honestly feel that, like, if Alabama was to play if Alabama was to play Oregon on a mutual site, I think Alabama would be favored by at least 7 to 10 points.
Yeah.
I feel like, I understand LSU won, so you have to give them credit, but I feel like we had sloppy missed tackles yesterday, the 2 unforced fumbles, one by Tua and one by the punter. LSU didn't cause those. Those were just sloppy play.
Great point.
And with all the drops from the receivers, I really feel like if we do get in, I feel like LSU does not want to play us, because I definitely think we can beat them without a doubt. But I just wanted the last thing I also want to bring up is Oregon, when he was, I guess, in his press conference in the locker room after the game, he was using all kinds of foul language and cussing, and his players were ranting and raving. I just feel like that's very disrespectful, because you would never see Nick Saban do that. You know what I mean? And the Alabama players have class. So I was just wondering if you heard about that as well, about the Oregon. cussing in the locker room.
Yeah, I saw him. I mean, first of all, Orgeron is completely fired up. I mean, this is a guy who's been wanting to beat Alabama since he signed the paperwork. And signing the paperwork at LSU, you have to beat Alabama. That's a prerequisite to get that job and to keep that job. So he just extended his job. And if he wants to go anywhere else, anyone's going to give him a shot because he beat Nick Saban head-to-head at Bryant-Denny Stadium, something that hadn't been done in 31 games. So is it right to go off the field and act like that? I don't know. I mean, these guys are full of emotion. It's after a game. Would Nick Saban do that? Who knows? I mean, we don't see all the stuff that's in the locker room. We've seen Nick Saban get fired up before. Does Bryant-Denny belong to Ed Orgeron? No, of course not. Last night it did, but Tiger Stadium, and does that belong to Nick Saban? Probably more so than it does Bryant-Denny to Ed Orgeron. So these coaches are fired up. It was a big victory for LSU. They came in, they proved they were the better team head-to-head. I'll be eager to see if they can close out, because that is a very good football team with a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. That they did a great job just coming in, executing, and as you said, those costly miscues by Alabama, a couple of those were just self-imposed. I think that interception right before halftime, that was on Tua, and that really led to the ultimate score in the game being 46-41. Great overall matchup. I love to see these two teams go at it. I don't know if Alabama has the defense to stop them, but then again, does LSU have the defense to stop Alabama? I mean, I could see that rematch being like 60s in the 60s or something like that. It'd be crazy. But
yeah, and did you notice that the refs blew a lot of calls that went against Alabama, like on the Waddle touchdown, on the return? How did they not call the face mask on that?
I don't know. His helmet, I'm lucky, he's lucky his helmet stayed on, right? And then how about Thaddeus Moss? I mean, he clearly stepped out.
I agree. That was another one.
That was a huge call, because right after that, LSU scored a touchdown. So there was a couple things, but I don't think the penalties I'm looking right now, let's see, Alabama had 7 penalties for 53 yards. LSU had 4 for 35 yards. There was a couple penalties, but this game came straight down to LSU had a better game plan. They executed better. Maybe not even a better game plan. They just executed better, right? Head to head. They just executed better.
They made the plays when they had to, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the last thing is, Kyle, what I wanted to say, so to answer your question earlier, yes, I definitely think that Alabama is clearly one of the top 4 teams. I actually think if they don't make as many mistakes, I think they're the top team in the country. I know their defense is a little shaky. But, so I feel like if we win out, I think we'll definitely get in. And if Auburn beats Georgia this week, I think that actually helps us as well also. And then, of course, if LSU beats Georgia, whoever they play in the SEC championship, and we win out. But you would definitely agree, though, correct, that you think that if we win out and Oregon wins out, we should get in, though, right?
Yeah.
Based on the fact that if we beat Auburn bad and they lost to Auburn.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point. So there's a couple things that we're looking at for the playoffs. And number one is Alabama has to win out. LSU has to win out. I think that bodes well if LSU continues their momentum and they just fly into the college football playoffs as a ranked number 1 team, right? Especially beating Georgia in the SEC championship. Now, it would also help if Georgia loses to Auburn and then Alabama beats Auburn. That would certainly bolster Alabama's quality wins. But I think you make a great point. I don't see Oregon losing. I think they're going to beat Utah and finish as the Pac-12 champ and be that one team that the seeding committee is really looking at. But guess who they lost to in the first week of the season? They lost to Auburn on a neutral site. And I think if Alabama was – and I think it'll come down to this. If Alabama beats Auburn, they'll beat Auburn on the road, right? Whereas Oregon couldn't even beat them on a neutral site setting like you said. So Alabama wins out. I really like their chances. At first I was like, they lost. This is a critical game. They don't have enough on the schedule of strength. But now that I look at it and I see that the coaches and the AP have Alabama 4, I'm more confident today that Alabama, all they have to do is just win out along with LSU. And I think everything will be good for Alabama to, again, make the college football playoffs, bypassing the SEC championship. This will be the second time it's happened.
Yeah, it happened in 2017 when we won the championship. Yeah. Kyle, I just want to say you're awesome, and I love your show, and I love how you shoot straight, and you don't just go with your heart. You give the facts. So I just want to say you're awesome and appreciate all your hard work, man.
Hey, thank you so much, Edward. I appreciate it, man. I'll catch up soon.